What's up, everyone? Welcome to another Sales Hacker webinar. My name is Scott Barker, Head of Partnerships and Revenue at Sales Hacker, and appreciate you hanging out with us for the next 45 minutes to an hour. I know we all lead busy lives, so appreciate you carving out the time to learn with us today. And what we're going to be talking about, and it's extremely relevant, is managing the end of quarter scramble. As well as minimizing deal slippage and how not to, overwhelm either your reps or yourself if you are an individual contributor. And it's relevant because if you are on a monthly sales cycle, then you have about 4 days left in this month. So you may be going through this right now, and got some awesome guests on the webinar with me today. But before I introduce them, a few housekeeping things. So this will be recorded. So we always send it out after we finish up. So if you have to jump off, close a deal, or do a deal review with your manager, whatever it is, feel free to do so. We'll send it out within 24 hours. I always get some people emailing me saying, "Hey, where is it? Is it recorded?" Don't worry, we're going to send it. Number two is this is going to be a Q&A style discussion. So got some amazing sales leaders here with me, and we're going to be just breaking this down and having a discussion. So we want you, the community, to be very much involved throughout the whole process. So you'll see a little Q&A button at the bottom. Please go down there, introduce yourself, your name, your title, what company you work for, and if you have any relevant questions, we want to hear from you. So definitely get involved. And what we're really hoping that you'll take away from this discussion is strategies, tactical strategies for minimizing deal slippage, tips to ease the burden on your reps, and then some helpful tools and technologies that can just kind of help accelerate this whole process. But enough of me talking. To introduce my two guests, I want to introduce first Mr. David Simon. David, welcome.
Thank you.
Excited to
Great
have
to be
you.
here.
So David is the VP of Commercial Sales for North America over at DocuSign, and has also led teams at companies like Oracle, SuccessFactors, and Responsys. So a very, very impressive career, and just excited to be able to pick your brain for the next little while.
Great. And I always learn new techniques when I collaborate. So hopefully that'll be the experience for the audience. And I'm excited to learn from Mark as well.
Absolutely. And then that brings us to Mark Costaglo, my good friend and VP of Sales at Outreach.io. Mark, what's up, man?
What up?
What up? Welcome.
The expectation's too high. I don't know if I have that much to give.
You say that, and then I leave with a page of notes every time I have you on. So you sell yourself short, my man. All right. Well, let's dive right into it. So we've got roughly 45 minutes. It may take us to the full hour, and I want to just pack this with as much value as we can. So let's get the discussion rolling. And Dave, I think I'm going to start with you on this one. And I think to set the stage, a good place to start would be on the biggest challenges. So what are the biggest challenges that sales teams face around the we'll call it the end of quarter scramble. That was the title. So the end of quarter scramble, what are the biggest challenges that sales teams are facing right now?
So I'll start with the fact that there are more decision makers involved in a financial purchase for technology, for example, than there were, say, 20 years ago. I think what we saw a couple of decades back was major investments in CRM, supply chain systems, and ERP and on-prem systems for tens of millions of dollars, or in some cases, hundreds of millions, that ended up being shelfware or not adopted across functional teams. So what's happened more recently in the last decade or 15 years is companies have put more structure around their purchase decisions and taken more control to ensure that when those decisions are made, they account for the needs of all teams and members that are going to use the technology. So that makes selling more complicated than it was 20 years ago. And certainly as deal sizes get larger, there's a correlation. The committees get larger that have to review and approve those purchases. So they're busy. People are busy. They have a lot on their plates. They're trying to get deals done, but they have to herd cats. You have to find a good mobilizer to herd cats. And ultimately, it's easy to fall into the trap of not uncovering the right information or the right obstacles to getting a deal done if you're a salesperson.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you brought up so many good points there. And I actually want to let's quickly take a step back, because you brought up a lot of good points. And I would love to understand who's actually joining us on this webinar. So I think it will help us, frame the discussion as we move forward. So let's do a really quick poll with the community. And I just want to know if you're at a commercial size organization, mid-market, or SMB. So if we can do that poll now, that would be perfect. And we'll give you about 20 seconds to answer it. Awesome. And then simultaneously, what would also be helpful, if people want to jump on the chat, so not the Q&A, but the chat, and let us know if they're an IC, individual contributor, a manager, or director level and above. That would also be super helpful just as we go to kind of frame this conversation. All right, and we'll stop the poll now. All right, and results will come in shortly. Okay, interesting. Pretty even split. So the most is actually commercial. So 41% are from commercial organizations, 30% coming from mid-market, and 38% SMB. So that's super interesting. Pretty even split across the board. Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying, Dave, that these, it's just getting more and more complex. And I think it will continue to get more complex, and more stakeholders are going to get into these deals. And Mark, are you seeing these challenges as well?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the more people you got to get a hold of, the harder it's going to be. I would say the main things that our team here at Outreach deals with, and some of the guys that I'm close to and talk to a lot, is number one is you have this idea of conflicting priorities. Like your legal has to deal with not only the deals that you want to put through, but also has to deal with the deals that your vendors that are selling you want to put through. So you have like these split priorities. Like people are kind of burning both ends of the candle, and eventually that makes it difficult, and you have to help people balance that. The other thing is like, most reps, really what they're battling is like their own paranoia, desperation, and hysteria. You know what I mean? Like, it's like the end of the month. If I don't get this deal in, like I'm going to go on plan, or like I'm not going to get this commission, or I'm not going to hit this accelerator. And like, if you can just remove yourself from the situation, calm yourself and just get like real with like helping provide value and helping guide the buyer through the deal, I think you're usually going to be okay. But like you mix in all these other crazy things, and that's what usually ends up hurting yourself. And part of that you stack on top of it is, okay, well, I got 6 people I need to wrangle here in the next week. That seems like a lot. And so you kind of like rush through each one, or you don't do each one the way that they need to be done. That helps you, get the deal done. And then that's when you run into trouble. Yeah, that makes sense. And where do you think that kind of paranoia you mentioned, the reps, where's that stemming from, and how can you kind of combat that as a sales leader? Well, I like to call it like the stink of desperation. And I remember early on in my sales career, I would do a lot of my selling in like a 3-month period. Like I do like 80% of what I do in a year, I do in 3 months. And so the pressure was on. And I remember I was having a year where I just, like the first 6 weeks of that 3 months, I just blew it out. Like I did everything I'd ever had hoped to do and beyond like what I was, hoping to attain. So I'm sitting there the last 6 weeks with all these meetings on the books and all this work I had to do. And I'm kind of like, I don't know if I want to do it. And I kind of would just show up and I would just say, hey, listen, like, these are my terms. This is how I do it. If you don't like it, you probably don't want to do business with me. Like, there was zero desperation. And when I sold like that, I actually sold better in the second half of that 3 months than I did in the first half. And right. I think as a leader, what you have to do is your job is to help people understand, like, we're here to help you hit your quota and not to ram your quota over your head and to fire you because of it. And we're here to help you find a good fit. And like, you have to, that's where you have to be like a people person. You have to understand like the different reps on your team, how they're motivated, what puts them in that place where they feel desperate, and make sure that they don't go there. That's a leader's huge part of what a leader should be doing at the end of a quarter, at the end of a month, depending on how your cycles go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. And it's almost like, leaders traditionally have kind of applied or seemingly applied pressure, at the end of quarter. And, part of what you're saying is actually it's your job as a leader to alleviate pressure and get people feeling comfortable and get people feeling like in the zone. And, it doesn't matter. It's going to work out. You've got the training. Everything's, going to work out. That's interesting. David, do you see that at all with the DocuSign team, just kind of getting maybe call it overwhelmed at the end of quarter? And do you have any strategies for helping alleviate some of that stress?
Yeah. So naturally, we do a bunch of business the last couple of weeks of the quarter. It puts a lot of strain on our revenue ops, finance teams, and on our legal teams. And I think the best, there are a couple of approaches to pulling deals forward in the quarter. And I'm going to just hit on something Mark mentioned with the stink of desperation. Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan of Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference, and a lot of the negotiation techniques in close. Great book. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of end of quarter stress comes from poor or subpar negotiation planning and thinking through a series of gives and gets that pull the deal forward, right? So one practice that we try to implement for our bigger deals at DocuSign is if we have a close date of the very last day of the quarter, that's probably a signal or a red flag that we don't really understand the decision process and we don't feel like we're in a position to influence it, right? So higher probability that the deal will slip. But I think the best technique that you can use to alleviate that stress and pull the deal forward is, number one, strong decision process discovery, right? Asking all of the right questions of stakeholders about who's involved in the decision, answering questions like, why are they going to buy, why now, and why from us, and having a mechanism where managers pressure test the answers to those questions from the AEs and make sure it's not just sort of a stock answer of problems we solve for customers, but it's tailored, right?
Yeah.
But it's uncovering why the deal is going to get done, but why the deal might not get done and what the potential obstacles and risks are and with whom they reside. So discovery is one of those processes that everybody conceptually understands, but it takes some investment and practice to develop expertise in uncovering all of the details of a decision process, especially with a large bank or telco, and all of the reasons the deal might not happen on our timeline. And then you can course correct or implement tactics to try to mitigate that risk. But the other big thing is controlling the negotiation and leveraging concessions, having a purposeful plan for negotiating that, usually it's like what we try to practice here at DocuSign is we'll give 2 or 3 concessions that anchor around an end price. And as we provide those concessions, they get successively smaller. So using round numbers, we might start with a price of $100 and give 30% in exchange for a multi-year deal that closes by our end of quarter. but the next concession might be 7%, signaling the end. Mm-hmm. If you don't signal the end to the buyer, then that smacks of desperation. If your next discount is higher than your first, for example, that signals that you're not sure how valuable your product is for your customer. And that also drives an unintended lack of confidence on the part of the buyer that they're partnering with the right company and product. Yeah. So that's the stink of desperation that can actually elongate your deal when you're trying to accelerate your deal by being aggressive with discounting. But leveraging those discounts and the give-get strategy, bartering, to pull the deal forward so it's not last day of the quarter, to pull it to the 15th of the month, which is, and our talk track here is, hey, our legal and our finance teams get overloaded the last week of the month. It's sort of like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. And it puts a lot of pressure on them. And it's worth it to us to give you a few points to alleviate that pressure. It's a big win for us. And we're willing to do it if you can sign by the 15th.
Yeah. I think one of the things that David does really good is this very simple phrase that I think a lot of reps just kind of forget in their need to win the deal, which is quid pro quo. Like, I'm going to give you something and you will give me something back. That's what a partnership is. It's finding a happy medium where the give and the get are balanced in the right way. Good selling is quid pro quo. Bad selling is, I need to get this deal in. I'll give you 50% off if you get it in by the end of the month. That there's no ask back, and that reeks of desperation and somebody that's just trying to take your money, not somebody that's trying to partner with you. So, and then the thing that I love that David talks about is this, it's not just quid pro quo, but hey, if you do this, I'd like to sign by the 15th of the month rather than at the end of the month for X, Y, and Z reasons, which his reasons are awesome, is what happens if you don't sign at the 15th? And see, like, forgetting that second part is where the reps get lost, because what happens is you say, listen, I'll give you 20% off if you sign by the 15th. Then what happens when they don't sign by the 15th? The rep now gives them 30% off. Then he gives them 40% off. You know what I mean? And like, there's no, hey, listen, if you sign by the 15th, you get 20% off. After that, though, I'm only going to be able to give you 10% off because the value to our company is less than it is if you sign by the 15th. And so like that kind of like when the bomb goes off, when the clock strikes zero, Cinderella has to turn back into her street clothes. You know what I'm saying? And most reps forget that second part. They first of all, they don't do quid pro quo. They don't ask for something back. And then they don't do something that says after that hasn't happened, this is what the terms will revert to.
Yeah. You guys brought up a ton of excellent points there. So what I'm hearing is, make sure that you're asking before you're giving. Quid pro quo. Set a timer on the kind of the partnership or the give and gets a little bit. And then, David, what I heard you say is, it's okay to apply pressure as a manager, as a leader, but make sure that you're doing that at the beginning when you can actually still course correct. By the time you're at end of quarter, it's too late anyway, and it's unnecessary pressure because you didn't find out the why. You didn't find out the why now. You didn't find out the why us at the beginning. Yeah, that's awesome. And we're definitely we're hitting on a topic that is very near and dear to our community, it looks like, just based on the number of questions. We probably have about 10 questions already, which is cool. So let's defer to the community really quickly. And David,
Scott, I got a good one. I got a good one on here that's drawing my eye. And I'm going to let David take first crack at it, but I want to make sure we do this one, which is
Mark, take it out. You got this.
I just saw it on Ian Meadow, put it on there, and I'm like, that's a question right there that like people want to know, which is, what if multiple competitors like start aggressively slashing prices for what's a comparable functionality? David, how do you guys handle that?
So we do come from a place where we have a richer, more complete platform than the competition. We're proud of our unique capabilities. But we also are in a high velocity business, right? And so I would love to tell you that we will never get competitive on price, but sometimes we will. If we're working with a small, struggling company that is contracting, they don't have a lot of budget, we will say, hey, do we want to do a transactional deal here? But we're very careful not to do that where the company is healthier and the business value that we're providing is clear, right? And that's part of the sales job, to uncover the business challenges and to solve those business challenges with a differentiated solution. And we feel we do a good job of that. So we don't chase price. So we won't chase a falling knife and competitor A dropped by X dollars, then competitor B doesn't. We don't do that. What we'll do is we'll approach the conversation to verify there's the why buy, why now, why DocuSign. If we feel that the buyer is genuine in their preference for DocuSign, we'll find a price that they feel good about and we feel good about, but it will never be a price matching scenario.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so we do what the competitors are doing, and it's more about what do we feel fair value is for this specific customer.
Yeah, that's the place to start from right there, is like, have you done a good job explaining your value or not? And if the price starts going slashed, I think the first thing you do is you apologize. You say, hey, listen, I as a seller must not have gotten you, Mr. Buyer or Mrs. Buyer, to a place where you understand why we're charging so much more. And like, that's on me. Like, why don't we take a couple steps back so that I can show that to you? And then the second thing that you can do that's a little bit more aggressive is you can say, hey, listen, there's a reason why people discount. And what I ask is you like, look behind the price and look at the reason. Like, why do most reps discount? It's because they're afraid they're not going to win the deal. Why are you afraid you're not going to win the deal? Because you know you're not the best solution for somebody, and you're trying to get them to look at price instead of looking at value and fit and partnership. And so for us, a lot of times what we have to do is we have to say, you know what, like, if they're going to give you this for free and discount this and do the professional services at a huge discount, and they're going to do this and this and this, like, really, what does that say about them wanting your business and wanting your money? Or does it say that they want to be a great partner? Like, we want to be here and be a partner. That means that you have to pay us what we're worth so that we can sustain as a business and be around to continue to help you. We can't do a deal that like isn't good for the business, because that's not what a good partnership is. And so, what is their motivation behind all the discount? Is it to get you to look at something else like price rather than looking at the value that they should be looking at? Because we all know, like, the biggest thing that you can wave around that causes people's attention to be shifted is price. And the minute I start talking price, like, everything else kind of like drowns out. You get a little tone deaf to value and differentiation, and you have to bring them back to that and be like, the reason they're raising their hands is because they don't have the other stuff.
Yeah. And I think I agree with you, Mark. It's a great opportunity to politely challenge the buyer. Some buyers will prioritize price because they're either A, the company's not healthy, or B, they're not the right person to care about the value, and they're just trying to solve a tactical problem. And if that's the case, we either need to find someone else within the organization to sell to, or decide they're not ready for us today. But when they are, we'll be there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And again, definitely a hot topic, this discounts thing, because the questions keep coming, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but there's one more question that I think is interesting. So when you give discounts, to get the deal in, you go in and you're like, okay, well, we'll give this concession. That's obviously going to lower the rep's commission on the deal. How do you as leaders manage that relationship? And David, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I usually, when I get involved in a deal, I prep with my sales managers and the AEs that report to them to understand we're all in agreement on our discount strategy and what we're going to give and what we're going to get in return. Mm-hmm. And what I've usually observed, honestly, is that I'm lifting them up, right? So they want to discount more aggressively than I do, and we start with, where do we want to finish in a worst case scenario? Like, what is the bottom price that we would consider to be a good deal? And then we'll create 2 or 3 barter scenarios with diminishing discount levels, and we'll agree on what our asks in return are. And those asks can be length of term, can be agreement execution date, could be marketing support in the form of testimonial videos or case studies. And there are others, right? But we'll agree on that plan. So I go into those discussions with a plan.
Yeah.
And I don't, if we can't get the deal done at the plan discounts and give-get strategy that's been laid out, then I'll circle back with my team and we'll figure out, do we want to go below our anchor price?
Yeah, makes sense. So free and open communication, and there's a consensus from the entire team. Everyone's bought in before you're ever, moving forward. Makes sense.
I just think it's so critical not to wing those negotiation discussions and not to do them in isolation, thinking there's not going to be a subsequent conversation, right? Thinking through 2 or 3 bites early in the sale will help quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you even look at it just from sheer numbers, right? If you're an AE trying to do all the negotiation yourself and you're going up against a buying team of 5 or 6 or 7 people, they just have more brains in the room. They're going to be able to, get what they want more than you can, right? And it's almost like an arrogance to think that you wouldn't need, to bring in your manager, to bring in a solutions engineer, all these other people to help you kind of, reach proper terms that are going to be mutual beneficial for both parties. Yeah. Mark, same question out your way. How are you looking at this?
So to me, I look like, what is the rep actually asking here? Because of course you understand the more I discount, the less commissions I make. What most reps are worried about is if I don't discount, then I don't get paid anything because I won't win the deal. And I think that's like what they're trying to manage. They feel like if they can't discount, then they can't win the deal. And I would say that it typically means that you're not selling strong. My best reps don't talk about discounts to win deals. They know they've won the deal. They're just trying to make sure that the value and the pricing are aligned, and it's a great deal for the customer as well as for us. And like discounting is a strategic thing, not like a tactical thing. It's not like if I don't discount, I can't get the deal. Like if you're in that place, that means you're not selling strong. If you're asking yourself that question, you need to think about your process, the questions you're asking, how you're talking about value, and like, how are you making sure that the person is getting value? Because what happens a lot is, you in a sales cycle, you both kind of start off at the same place and you're getting to know each other. And the rep accelerates a little bit. And then what they do is they stop usually and they hope that the prospect comes along. And then it's kind of like this accordion back and forth inchworm type of thing, right? Like the rep goes a little bit, then the customer or prospect comes with them. But unfortunately, what the reality is the rep usually goes and then they ask some kind of weak question or do something assumptive like, oh, they got it because they seemed excited in the call. And they don't do anything to make sure that customer's come along with them. So there's a gap. And then they continue to sell and the gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger because the customer isn't coming along with them. And when you get to the point where you're like, if I can't discount, I can't win this deal, it's usually because the gap of understanding of value and what's going on is so great between the buyer and the seller. And so like what I would say the way to overcome that need is to like break what you're doing into smaller chunks and just ask the person, like don't ask them something like, does this make sense? Or what do you think about this? Because those are bad questions. What you want to do is you want to ask them a question that applies the value they should understand to how it meets their business. So for example, how do you see outreach helping you increase your inbound lead conversion? And, after I've demoed and talked about that value, they should be able to tell me in their own words how they've digested everything I've sold. That way you get out of the pricing conversations and you get into better conversations that you can actually control and sell on. Mm-hmm. The only way to sell on price is the discount. So don't sell on price.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not even, yeah. Sorry, go ahead, David.
No, I was just going to say I completely agree with Mark on this concept of weak questions. I think it's like happy ears and happy mouth. Words or questions can be phrased really softly, right?
Yeah.
The AE could ask, hey, how are you feeling about outreach? Or how are you feeling about DocuSign, which is a soft question. Or like once there's confidence that the data has been collected and the prospect should know their preferred partner, a very direct question like, if you were to choose today, would you choose DocuSign? It's a yes or no. It's like in a world where we're commonly asked to, we're expected to ask open-ended questions. It's a yes or no question. Do you prefer DocuSign and why, right? And when you get an ambiguous answer like, well, we really like your responsive signing features. Oh, okay, but you didn't answer the exact question. Mm-hmm. Do you prefer DocuSign?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that usually is like that signals the lean. And if you get an ambiguous answer to the question, then you may not be winning the deal. And that's one of the biggest reasons for end of quarter splits. Like split deals close at a much lower percentage traditionally than in quarter deals. Your win rate goes down when deals slip. Either the project's not a priority or you're not the preferred provider.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point there. I love the direct question. And I think that stems a lot from, sales reps wanting to be liked, like putting too much importance on wanting to be liked from your prospect. I was just reading, Keenan, he's the sales guy, he's a thought leader in the space. And I was reading this article he wrote, and it was the recent stats are 86% of top performers say it's not important to be liked by your prospect, whereas 84% of the bottom performers said it put a very high importance on being liked. And I thought it was super interesting because sometimes that's when you'll ask those softer questions, and you don't want to come off as like abrasive or aggressive when, sometimes it's by asking that you're not wasting their time. You're getting to what they want ultimately faster, and then they're going to respect you for it. And they're actually going to end up ultimately liking you more because you're the guy who can get the guy or the gal who.
I don't think people ask those questions the same. And I think that's the most important work of a salesperson is to do the discovery about what might go wrong and uncover those risks and get answers to the questions you're not sure you want to hear the answers to.
Yeah. Those are the best questions. The ones you don't want to ask are the best ones to ask. Yeah. And to David's point, like if you listen to his example of a bad answer to why DocuSign, it had to do with features. And like all of us know, you don't want to sell features. Like if their why isn't like, this is how you solve this problem, or this is the value I get out of it, then you haven't sold right, or they haven't received how you've sold correctly. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great takeaway right there. It's just getting them to mirror your value prop and make sure that it's not, the features, it's the benefits. That's awesome. Okay. So those are a few awesome ways on how you can minimize the dreaded deal slippage. Ask the tough questions, at the beginning. What are some other ways that you can minimize a deal, slipping into the next quarter? And Mark, you want to kick this one off?
Yeah. So Chase kind of gets at this in the chat. His comment kind of was like, of course, say prep better, then you don't have the problems at the end of the quarter. But like I got problems at the end of the quarter, so what do I do about it, right? Yeah. Like I almost don't care how good of a seller you are. We all have that situation where we have a few deals where like we haven't done a great job, or maybe they're just not a good buyer. There's people that suck at buying stuff out there, and like they lead you to these horrible positions. And I think the main technique that I like to use is I like to have the rep be the negotiator and kind of pull themselves a way as a middleman between them and the person that makes the decision to okay and authorize what they're about to do. So what I mean by that is you got three parties. You have the buyer, the seller, and then you have the approver on the seller side of who's going to approve everything. So what my reps do a lot of times is they will come to me and we'll create a plan, very similar to what David does. But then when they go back to the buyer, they say, listen, here's a plan that I've come up with. I think this is a good plan, and I'm going to see if my manager is going to approve it. But before I go get it approved, definitely from finance and everybody else, I need you to shake my hand and say, yes, we're going to do this. Like, I don't want to go and get this thing worked out to get it approved internally and do all these resources and then have it come back to you just to have you like come back 2 days later with, we need something else. Like, let's get on a call right now. And in 5 minutes, we should be able to do one of two things. Either decide that we're going to be a customer and give each other a high five, or two, decide like this isn't a deal for either of us and we'll walk away friends. And I think like that language a lot of times like allows people to understand like, all right, you're ready to get stuff done. Then you come with a good idea and you get them to agree to the idea before you get it approved, right? Because then what happens is if the deal slips or you lose them and they come back later, or something doesn't go wrong and they want to switch like after a couple months, is they come back expecting that same deal again, which is bad, right? The only reason you want to give a deal is to, or give a discount or to do something special is to win the deal, not to get a chance to compete. Like the reason I'll give a discount is because we win the deal. I don't do a discount to get a chance to win the deal. And so I think if you come in with a plan and say like, this is my plan, let's agree on it, me and you together, that we're going to do this. Then a lot of times you can get them to agree to something, then you go get approval, and then the deal is done. So that can be a way to kind of force stuff at the end of the quarter that works really well.
Yeah, I love that. Getting them kind of almost pre-approved and pre-bought in before you go and do the legwork on your end. I like it. David, any other tips, tactics that DocuSign sometimes uses?
Yeah, I'll just add, so Mark, with his description of the handshake and the firm commitment, it's another good example of soft versus hard questions. The soft way to do that would be, if I can get you this discount, can you get this deal done by this date? Or right, as opposed to, are you committed to partnering with us and getting this done by this date? Let me go work to get the approval. But we talk a lot about customer verifiable outcomes, right? And some examples are, does the buyer work with you to create a business case and then loop you in to present the business case? Those are signals that you're in a good position to win the deal and the deal is tracking. But every company is going to have a slightly different buyer motion, right? Business case creation might not be appropriate for every sales org, but for our team, it's setting up executive connections and influence mapping. So if the signer or the approver on the customer side is willing to get on a call with me to talk about the partnership and to set the partnership up by establishing a relationship, that's a good signal. And if they're not, doesn't mean we don't get the deal, but our confidence wanes. So we have a number of those verifiable outcomes. What are the behaviors that our buyer takes that signal to us, based on all the other deals we've done, that we are trending toward a win and a predictable close date with a mobilizer who can make it happen?
Yeah.
So I gave two examples. So executive connections or calls, and business case collaboration and presentation. But there are many, right? Yeah. Are we dual-threaded or multi-threaded? Do we have cross-functional participation in a meeting, or is this person unable to influence people to even show up?
Yeah.
Right? Tells you a lot about their intentions, their urgency, or their ability to influence people internally.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. So if you've hit on multiple of those customer verifiable outcomes, then you're going to weight it higher, and your forecasts have more confidence in pulling it into this quarter. I like it.
And it helps for every company to agree on what those are for them.
Right. In advance. Yeah.
For every selling order.
Yeah. That's awesome. All right. Let's talk a little bit. This is Sales Hacker. So we like tools. We like technology. I want to know, because speed is crucial at this point too, right? Everything's got to be done quickly. Like you said, finance, procurement, all your teams are kind of inundated with contracts, agreements coming in. And so speed is important. And Mark, what tools, technologies does outreach kind of lean on at the end of the buyer's journeys to really pull these across the line?
I mean, obviously we use outreach. I mean, but I don't want to pitch outreach, but that helps out a ton. But honestly, I don't think it's really about, I don't think we have a tool that helps to do that. I think it is good work up front in a deal where you come up with a plan to close when you want to close, and then you ask the hard questions like David said, and then you just make sure that the processes in place that you have internally kind of work at the speed that they need to work at to complement the slowness typically that your buyer works at. So for us, it's turning a deal at the end of the quarter has as much to do with us turning it internally as fast as we can. And, we just have a nice little escalation path and open lines of communication between the departments that work with us that help us get that done really well in most cases. So, I can't say it's a tool. I'd say for us, it's more of a mindset and processes in place to support the things that would typically slow things down that we can control.
Yeah, makes sense. And David, what about your team?
So there are 3 or 4 that come to mind. First of all, less for accelerating close, but to open doors, we are heavy users of outreach as well. So we use that both to open doors with new logos and also to drive renewals, upsell, and cross-sell to existing customers. We're heavy users. But in terms of accelerating closure, it starts sort of mid to late cycle with first of all, Salesforce, right? Just to sort of manage the business and understand close dates and activity levels of deals and collaborate on deals as a group selling team, right? A virtual selling team. And we also are heavy users of Value Cloud, which is a product Decision Link offers. So it's a cloud-based ROI tool, business case tool. So I mentioned earlier that we use business cases as a verifiable outcome. What I love about that platform is, at least the way we've configured it, it's very lightweight, not many inputs required, and there's a visually appealing tear sheet that your buyer can take to drive support throughout his or her organization. And then we use DocuSign for Salesforce to accelerate the closure of deals. If you send over Word documents to your prospect, you're inviting red lines, and we'll just send them agreements using our own product. And that shaves days off of our sale of back and forth. And it's, I'm plugging my own company, but this is our value prop. You can sign anywhere on any device. And so when execs and approvers are, as they're prone to do, out with their families at the end of a quarter or the end of the year for holidays, seems like holidays always are at the end of quarters and years, they can jump on a mobile device and review and sign agreements. That's really helpful.
Absolutely. And having personally been a seller at organizations with DocuSign and without DocuSign, I don't think I'd work at a company that didn't have it, because it's one of those things that once you experience life like in that better way, you can't really put it back in the bag. Like I would never, just email back and forth. It just doesn't make sense. Or dreaded fax machines. Remember that going on? That was crazy too.
Yeah. Don't want to go back.
No, can't do it. Can't do it.
Just last week, we had somebody that wanted to sign ink on paper. And it was basically like, I don't know what happened. The world almost came to an end. It was the weirdest, strangest, oldest fashioned thing I've ever done. So.
Yeah. I remember literally only like 3 years ago there we'd get like mail of these like big contracts, and it was just crazy. And then when you go through them, and then like, you know, there'd be a few red lines, so you'd send it back, and then it would come back a few days later, and it was so archaic, and it doesn't seem that long ago, but I'm glad there's a better.
It's become standard practice very quickly over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
To do electronic signature.
Definitely. I love it. Okay, gentlemen, we've got some great questions, and I want to leave some time to kind of burn through them. We'll get through as many as I can, but what I want to hear is some war stories, some war stories, success stories, wherever you want to go with this. What are some of your best end of quarter sales stories when it really, really came down to that wire, and maybe you thought you weren't going to get it across, but you know, maybe you're out late at night and boom, you get an email and you see something come in, or something along those lines. And David, I'll start with you.
Yeah, they all involve some form of stalking. I know that some people might cringe when they hear it, and it's not a practice you like to rely on, but when you have a particularly large deal that could either make your quarter or put you into dramatic accelerators. My teams have been known to jump on a plane and lobby squat. The weirdest story is that we did a deal at Responsus with a large New York retailer, and the signed paper was actually handed over in a restaurant parking lot at like 11 p.m. And it was, the guy who received the deal was like, it was the weirdest thing ever. It felt like I was doing a drug deal. It just felt dirty. But we have those stories where people will jump on the plane, things have gotten quiet. I only recommend that if you have the attention of the signer. If you're jumping on a plane, the lobby squat, and the signer hasn't connected with you and expressed an interest in doing the deal, and you may not get the return on that investment.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Just going full committed. I love it. No turning back once you're on a plane.
It can work. I've seen it work many times. But obviously you don't want to have to be in that position.
Yeah. Last resort. Mark, what about on your end?
I think, I don't know if it's super crazy or anything, but it does speak to one thing, which is the awesomeness of having a true champion. And a champion is someone that has influence and is rooting for you in like a more than normal way, right? And we had a big deal that was coming down at the end of the quarter, and we needed it to cross some huge goal that we had. And our champion for the last 2 days of the month basically set up a desk outside of the procurement person's office, and every 10 minutes would like knock on the door and she'd be like, "Hey, did you get to my thing yet?" And so the last day of the month, literally, she basically just kept her phone on the desk, and we would just talk to her and keep her company while she was sitting there knocking on the procurement person's door to finish out the paperwork. But I don't know how crazy that is. It seems crazy to me, but really what it is when you do a great job selling, you should have a rabid fan, at least one in the organization that's willing to do crazy things for you to help you out because they like you as a person and they really understand what you're going to do for their business. So
yeah.
No late night drug deals like David.
No drugs.
I love it.
That's MSAs.
Yeah. LSD, MSA,
So I'm curious, in those situations, did you both like open the kimono, so to speak, and be like, "Listen, like we have this goal we're trying to hit. It doesn't get done without this deal." Do you tell them that in those certain circumstances?
If it's the right person and you have the right relationship, you can. But most people don't give a crap about your goals, so it has to be the right person.
Yeah. I have found that with the right person, being vulnerable can be helpful, right? So if it's delivered in a way that is, hey, it's a nice win for us and we want to make it a win for you too. Let me know if that's realistic and something you want to work toward. If not, we'll recalibrate. Then you're not like imposing your needs on the buyer with guilt. You're just saying, hey, we have a win here. If you're up for working toward our quarter end, even though your timeline might more naturally be early next quarter, then we want to make it worth your while. Let me know. If not, that's okay too. And it's your timeline, but let us know. Right. And so that type of vulnerability, because it's low pressure and you're not trying to force the buyer into an unnatural buying cycle, is usually pretty well received.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that way of framing it. Okay, let's go. We'll probably have time for, let's say, 2-3 questions from the community. And again, thank you everyone for the amazing engagement. Lots of questions here. All right, let's go with this. And Mark, I'm going to start with you on this one. What are some strategies that your team has used to keep the business owners engaged when you're working with procurement?
Okay, so I'm working with procurement and I have like a business champion that isn't tied to procurement at all. Well, so the first thing you can do is keep them updated on what's going on with procurement. Like if they're interested in buying, they're interested in hearing your side of the story, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is ask them, how they can help. Like a lot of times they're willing to help you with procurement and security and jostling documents around and getting to the top of the stack. So that's the other way, is I ask them to help you in those processes when maybe they've just never been asked before and they're willing to do something. And then the last thing is if you're going to wait to the end to do procurement and everything else is done with your buyer, I would argue that you didn't begin procurement early enough. And to David's question, you didn't ask a tough question early enough, which is, hey, everything seems to be going in the right direction here. I know we have a few more holes to follow up, but why don't we go ahead and start procurement now rather than wait till the end? And so you should still have a couple meetings left to go and a couple things to drive home for the business case that is separate from the procurement case. And we talk a lot about sequential and parallel here, and most people do things sequentially. I do the IIM, then I do my demo, or I do my discovery, then I do my demo. Then I'll validate, then I do my proposal, and then I do my security review. And it's all this sequential stuff. If sales is done in parallel, it works a lot better. Like, hey, I'm getting close to procurement. Why don't I go ahead and start that as I'm finishing out these parts of the proposal document or whatever. So I think that's the best thing is don't do it sequentially, do it in parallel. That way you still have things to do with the buyer while you're in procurement.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. Yeah. Doing it parallel, and then you can kind of cross pollinate and keep them involved. David, what about yourself? Any strategies you've seen that have been successful?
So I think it's critically important to have a business sponsor that is strong internally before you move into procurement, because if you don't, and they hide and they bow down to procurement, you're potentially in trouble, right? You're just not going to get a deal you feel good about. You're not going to have much control over the terms, including timing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of a classic, very large enterprises sometimes with mature procurement functions. I use mature probably incorrectly here, will purposefully split and instruct you not to talk to your business partner while you're working with them. But I've never not been able to go back to my business partner when the deal was real. And you want to be respectful with procurement, but you need to be able to go back to your business partner because they understand the ROI and the business value, and they have more, they have benefit to gain.
Right.
By partnering with you, and the procurement person doesn't.
Yeah, that makes sense. They just have more skin in the game.
Be careful about it, but you can't lose touch with your business person. Having that conversation with your business person before you engage with procurement is important to do.
Yeah. Would strongly agree. All right, last question. Let's go here from. Okay. Ian Meadow. Ian got another question. Thank you, Ian. Okay, so what if your team and division is constantly behind their number and management and executives are constantly applying pressure? What do you do in that scenario? And David, we'll start with you.
So there's no easy answer to that question. That's a big
it's a broad
question. Was the plan set correctly? Right. I think everybody's under pressure, though. It may be more elevated and desperate in some companies than others, right? But we're all under pressure to perform quarterly and annually. I don't know that you modify your approach, but I do think you take the lead of the company. If your company wants to be more aggressive with pricing because it needs the business, then that's sort of a top-down thing that's hard to fight, right? Unfortunately, I just haven't been in that situation for long throughout my career, but Ian, you should be asking questions of leadership about whether the plan is the correct plan, or asking yourself that. Because if you're always behind, that's a symptom that maybe the market's not ready for your product, or the plan's been set too ambitiously with the board.
Yeah, agree. There's a lot going on with that question. It would probably take months of consulting and deep diving to get to the bottom of that one. But Mark, any high level response to that question?
Passing the buck from you down to the people you manage is a sign of bad management and bad leadership. If I'm feeling pressure about the number, my job isn't to pressure you about your number. My job is to help you come up with better plans and better strategies and identify better deals. And you should feel more supported in my time of desperation, not more pressured in my time of desperation, right? So that would be the first thing, is like, I would push back. And if a manager's pressuring me because we're about to miss numbers, I would just say, like, well, listen, happy to help, but I'm going to need you to help me. Like, you can't just say, I need you to do like 5 more deals. You know what I mean? When I don't have 5 more deals to do. And then the other thing is again, like, this is a little bit, pushing back, but you need to present A and B. Like, A is, I can succumb to your pressure, Mr. or Mrs. Manager, and I can do the deal fast. I'm going to need a large room to discount. It's probably not going to have the second year on it. And, it might be compromised in how they're onboarded because I don't take them all the way through the process and understand their needs. So if you want to pressure me, those are the type of deals you will get. Or I can do the deals the right way at the right price and run through the process the right way. But, like, I can't do both. I can't do everything faster, because the reason it takes time is because doing things the right way takes time. And like, I hate to say it, but really, if you're a rep in that position, like, you really only have one option, which is to push back at your manager. Unless you're just a person that doesn't hit your numbers, then maybe you should work harder. But assuming that that's not the case.
Yeah.
I just want to say, Mark, I could not agree more with you. It is like the AE in this scenario is in a really tough spot, and the manager and the manager's management should be revisiting the plan so that more people can be successful, because if that doesn't get fixed, there's going to be massive turnover, and that's not going to be good for revenue growth. But applying pressure or bailing out of the trench and becoming unsupportive with your team is absolutely the signal, or those are signals of a poor leader or an immature leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Yeah. No, I think it's super important, right? Your job there is to deflect the pressure and the negativity away from your team. They shouldn't feeling that at all. And there seems like some systemic issues there beyond just the sales org. Awesome. Okay. Well, gentlemen, that takes us to our time. I want to thank you both for sharing just a ton of valuable insight and hanging out with me for the last hour. And everyone who joined us, that was a great discussion. Thank you for the engagement, and go out there and crush your quarter.